Welcome to the Resistance.
Hey Xers, and welcome back to Gen X Resistance. I'm your host, Paul Stevens, and today we are going back, and I mean way back. Lately, I've been digging into my ancestry, doing that whole family tree thing, and I realized something that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. That it took thousands of people across hundreds of years, because, well, that's as far as I've gotten so far, just to make me. Now, usually when we look at our family trees, a lot of times the first thing that we look into or we lock into is our surname. And for me, that's Stevens. But when I dug into my DNA profile, it told a much richer story. It said I'm 49% English and Northwestern European, 39% Scottish. And that kind of lines up with my surname because the Stevens variation became more standardized after the Norman conquest of 1066. And I know I just completely nerded out right there. But when you dig in, you find that every mother, every grandmother, every great-grandmother, they all had maiden names. And it just branches what seems like forever. And it can be both overwhelming and a little humbling when you find out all of those branches come back to you. Now, the rest of me, as far as the DNA profile goes, Welsh, Norwegian, Dutch, Germanic. But those numbers aren't just statistics. They're lives. They're stories. Some of my ancestors crossed the oceans in the 1600s to start over in the New World. Some fought in the Revolutionary War, some as patriots, some as loyalists. And it took both of those paths to get to me. I've seen draft cards from both world wars. Found one ancestor who was scalped, another who was accused of being a witch and hung. So think about this. Every one of those people either survived or didn't, so that I could be here right now, sitting in front of this mic, talking to you. And it got me thinking a little bit about us, about Generation X. We're the generation that grew up in an analog world. We still heard stories. We still saw black and white photographs. We remember rotary phones, handwritten letters, and family legends passed down in person. And we are, like it or not, the last generation to grow up without the internet. The last ones to live part of our lives without being digitally tracked, tagged, and monetized. And now, well, we're raising kids in a world where AI writes their papers, TikTok teaches them truth, and everything they know about history might come from just a 15-second slideshow. So here's the question I've been wrestling with today. Are we the last link in this human chain, or are we the bridge between generations that live life and the generations that scroll through it? So I want to talk a little bit about some of the values that we inherited, those old world instincts passed down from generations that didn't need an app to know what mattered. Gen X grew up with a set of operating instructions that were silent but solid. We learned the things by watching, not by being told. How to respect privacy. And that just seems like a novel idea these days. There's no such thing as privacy anymore. Your phone, your watch, your tablet, your TV, hell, even your refrigerator can track you right now. We learn how to solve problems before asking Google or the woman in the phone who shall not be named. We learned how to shut up, observe, figure things out. And these weren't lessons, they were values. And we didn't get them from a YouTuber or a TikTok carousel. We got them by living in a world where time moved slower and you had to wait for what you wanted. We came from people who waited for letters from war, waited for crops to grow, waited for news to arrive by the newspaper, word of mouth. Now we rage or have an anxiety attack if our text it doesn't get answered in 2 minutes. And this is the cultural split that I don't think anybody's talking about. It's not just young versus old. It's analog value versus the algorithmic impulses. So think about this. Are we Gen Xers the last link in the chain that's breaking, or are we the bridge? Look, honestly, I go back and forth. Some days it feels like we're just watching this slow fade of everything that we grew up with: truth, privacy, conversation, memory, old photos dissolving in the sun. And other days, it feels like maybe, just maybe, we're the ones who have to keep it alive. We're not just holding on to what was, we're responsible for handing it off before it disappears entirely. Think about it. Our parents, our grandparents passed down more than just names and recipes. They passed down mindsets, how to get through hardships. Everything was hard. How to make something last. There wasn't a Walmart where you could just go replace something when it broke. They had to make it last and learn how to fix it when it did break. How to be useful without needing to be seen. Nobody was watching them. They weren't living for attention. They were just trying to survive. You think your great-grandfather survived war, or your grandmother endured a depression just so that you could spend 6 hours a day swiping through emotionally engineered nonsense? No. They didn't survive plagues, famines, wars, and droughts so I could get algorithmically brainwashed into doom scrolling. They made it through all that so I could be strong enough to carry something forward. And maybe you too. We can still tell our kids real stories, not just feed them history through filters, trends, corporate-approved factoids. We can still pass down real-world skills, hard-earned wisdom, the ability to focus on something longer than 15 seconds. That's our job now, to hand it off, to not let that chain break with us. Because if we don't preserve it, nobody else will. There's no one after us that can teach this information. There are no filters or apps that capture ancestral dignity. That comes from people, and we're still here. I look at my ancestry and I think about all those people who never got to tell their stories. They didn't have a microphone or a platform or podcast. Now I do. So what kind of legacy would I leave behind if all I did was talk about trends and headlines and whatever the algorithm told me to say? This, right now, is our chance to become a bridge, to take what was true, what was strong, what was real, and carry it forward, even if we're the last ones to remember what it felt like. When I look at my ancestry map, I don't just see names anymore. I see resistance. I see survival. I see quiet rebellion. And that sounds a lot like Gen X to me. We didn't start revolutions with hashtags. We didn't seek attention. We avoided it. But we watched. We remembered. And whether we knew it or not, we carried forward the strength of the people who had to fight for everything they had. They didn't leave us with likes and views. They left us with stories. And now it is our job to make sure that those stories don't get lost in a cloud server or buried under infinite scrolls. Because maybe we're not just the last analog generation. Maybe we're the last real connection to something deeper, something worth saving. So let's be the bridge. Let's be the memory. Let's be the resistance. All right, this has been Gen X Resistance. I'm Paul Stevens. And if you'd like to reach out to me or comment on this episode, you can do so at genxresistance@gmail.com or leave me a message using the link in the show notes. Until then, keep the story going. Keep resisting. Stay rad, my friends.